intelligence, of defense? Where are the people who resigned? How is it nobody resigned? How was it nobody was fired? If there was a failure to that extent, who's responsible for the details of that failure? And wouldn't you imagine, given the horrific scope of the outcome of such a failure, that people would be fired or would fall on their own swords, would voluntarily say, I'm resigning, we screwed up. In fact, the people most centrally involved tended to be promoted. The organizing principle of vers la vérité has to do with people coming together who may be left-wingers, right-wingers, socialists, capitalists, communists, but share a view that the official interpretation of 9/11 is wrong, and more than that, that failure of interpretation has huge consequences for the way we live and the future of our society. That it's not, we deal with lies all the time in the public milieu, but this particular one has been used to justify invasions, justify changing our laws. It has such significant ramifications. So if you don't get at that, and for instance, next week we'll be looking at the reality, well, there's an anti-war movement. There are people, many people in the country who are against our troops being in Afghanistan, U.S. troops being in Iraq, U.S. troops going into Pakistan. I mean, all these actions happen based on this interpretation of 9/11. There are people against, the way civil liberties are changed, Guantanamo Bay, renditions, all the abuses of power, all the fragile protections, which are very minimal and not very well developed, but things like habeas corpus. If you get picked up and put in jail, you have to be charged with something so you can defend yourself. But we don't have that anymore. So we've lost, very basic protections in our society. So one of those who spoke in Paris, and the person we will look at this evening, I've been watching her for some time, and the knowledge that she was going to be there really encouraged me to go. Her name is Cynthia McKinney. She's an African American. She served the people of Georgia in Congress, the people of the Atlanta area, for 4 terms. So this is a congresswoman. She ran for President of the United States for the Green Party in the last election. So this is a person of substance, and I had dinner with her. There were 14 of us the night prior to what we're about to see, and the dinner was in a restaurant that was founded in 1682 and is where Benjamin Franklin used to conduct his carryings-on with people in France who eventually backed what became the American Revolution. So it was fascinating to hear. It was fascinating to hear her talk about her constituency that she represented and to whom she had to go for votes. And in that constituency, there were many white supremacists, members of the Ku Klux Klan. And so her representatives, her constituents were many blacks and also white supremacists, members of the Ku Klux Klan. And she talked about her meetings, the two groups coming to meetings, because she's representing everybody. She's got to try to represent white supremacists and members of the Ku Klux Klan. And it was interesting because the people are oppressed and made to be distrustful and hateful towards one another, and in a way the economy which empowers a few massively wealthy people at the expense of the many. How is that done? Well, people are divided and people are turned against each other. So the white supremacists in the Ku Klux Klan, I mean, if you really got into the history of what's the experience of those people and how did they get to those ideas? Is it just some kind of genetic thing in them, or are they poor and marginalized and oppressed in their own way? So Cynthia McKinney She was just coming back from South Africa, and to me she is stepping forward to try to give a voice to marginalized peoples. To me she is the most obvious in the heritage of Martin Luther King, who came from that area. So she is going to talk about the Nobel Prize, Peace Prize that Barack Obama just received. She's going to talk about it in a critical light. You can imagine for an African American the pride of an African American in the presidency, but she did run against him in the last election. And she does see something not quite right about that Nobel Peace Prize. And if anybody would be in a position to recognize that, Tad Matsui, am I saying it correctly? Tad Matsui is prepared to talk about his own experiences, reflections, interpretations from his time in Israel, Palestine, and South Africa. Tad has been involved in the reform wing, the social justice wing of the United Church of Canada. The United Church of Canada has some very principled elements, parts, and has done very important work. When I started working at Native Studies in Sudbury, the founder of Native Studies, Dr. Ed Newberry, was a United Church clergyman. So I would say, there are different areas where there's some kind of refuge from the harshness of capitalism, the academy, labor unions, and the church. That's how I would see it. Otherwise, we're pretty much out there having to sink or swim according to the dictates of hard economic realities. There aren't that many places in society where some people, not everyone, and all of these institutions are capable of being corrupted and do get corrupted in certain situations, but the academy, labor unions, and the church. And so we've been going around and around the question of what is going on in Israel-Palestine. We started with Naomi Klein, we started with the Toronto International Film Festival. We've identified this kind of contest for hearts and minds. Mohammed El-Masri had a lot to say about it, but we really haven't got too much into what is actually in there. We know that there's a lot of controversy about it, but to go in there and look at that. So we'll advance that process tonight. So in any case, I took that camera with me. We're just getting used to this, and I handed it off to Josh this morning, and lo and behold, he's got 4 clips up on YouTube. It's what I consider to be the headlining event of the whole process, Cynthia McKinney's presentation. So we've made this available for this class, but the magic of the world as it's constructed today is we're also making it available for anybody else who has the internet. The 1.5 billion or whatever we're up to. Obviously, not everybody is going to know or care, but there may be hundreds of people out there who know and care. I met over the weekend, we call it truthers. Truthers, if you see on Fox News, if somebody's called a truther, that's a real insult. That's almost like being called a pedophile or some kind of maniac or something. But I'm becoming increasingly comfortable with this idea of being a truther. Not to say we have the truth, but we're looking for the truth. We want the truth. We're trying to get at the truth. Vers la vérité.